Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode, I think this is either 110 or 111. I start to lose track after a while. But I wonder if you've ever heard a team member say something like, these students just can't. I am sure that you have heard that and many other statements. Those kinds of mindsets spread fast and it holds everyone back. So, in today's episode, I'm going to break down how to stop that they can't cycle before it takes root. I'm going to share 3 strategies to shift thinking in the moment and proactively reshape conversations. Here are the 3 things you're going to learn about: phrases to avoid and mindsets to employ, perception checking, and my go-to pause method for reframing limiting beliefs. If you are leading a team and want to move from doubt to possibility, then this episode is for you. Let's get started. Hey there, welcome to the Catching Up with Casey show. If you are tired of chasing buy-in, frustrated by teams who just can't seem to get on the same page, or over the constant struggle of holding people accountable without feeling like you're micromanaging, this is the show for you. I'm Casey Watts, team leadership expert and the host of this show. I specialize in clarity, collaboration, and character, and I help leaders just like you take teams from chaos to cohesion, from frustration to alignment, so teams can actually work together toward a common purpose instead of against each other as though they are functioning in different organizations. Whether you lead a single team or a team of teams, on this show, we talk about strategies that are going to help you create a culture where accountability and autonomy go hand in hand. Now, with all of that said, let's dive into today's conversation and learn how to lead clarity-driven teams. Hey, okay, so I'm really excited about this episode, and what made me decide to record this episode is obviously my own experience with teams, but I know there are several of you out there who work with teams on a regular basis, and you come up against these phrases like they can't, right? So we have a group of teachers, just imagine, meeting in a collaborative space, and it could be a team planning meeting, it could be a meeting where they're reviewing data, it could be a faculty meeting, right? It could be any number of types of meetings where you might hear a team member or multiple team members saying things like, these students just can't. Now, that's not the only phrase that you might hear. Today, we're going to be talking about other phrases that we hear that hold teams back and end up causing them to spiral and solve the same, or try to solve the same problems over and over again. And I know it can be really challenging to figure out, especially in the moment, how do we respond? And I'm going to be talking to you today about some strategies to use, 3 specifically that we're going to use. And one of them is a proactive strategy, while the other 2 are not necessarily reactive, but they are actually responsive. So 1 proactive strategy and 2 responsive strategies. And really, all 3 of these can go hand in hand. And you might find yourself using all 3 of them in one meeting, one collaborative meeting with people. So we're going to dive in. And before we get started with this, I want to address why it's difficult to manage these times when we hear people using phrases that cause limiting beliefs and cause our teachers to stall out in their collaborative teams. And it's so interesting. I read recently some research that showed 70% of people in the workplace avoid difficult conversations, and sometimes they just ignore them altogether. 70%. Because here's what you're up against. When you hear these phrases, if you are going to address it, it actually does mean that you're going to have a difficult conversation, or at least an uncomfortable conversation. And the pure fact is, so many of us have not really developed that skill or practiced that skill over time. It becomes easier in our minds to just ignore it, avoid it, or nod our heads and try to move the team along when they get into these situations. Today, that ends. I want to give you some strategies and tools to help you feel more confident having some difficult conversations so you can actually address this and help your teams to be productive and to leave them feeling satisfied at the end of the meeting. Because if they are continuously bringing up these phrases that are limiting beliefs, they are going to be feeling down on their own. So we don't want that to happen where they're limiting their own capacity when this happens, limiting the capacity of their teammates. And so we're going to try to move past that. I started wondering why so many people really struggle to have difficult conversations, especially in the moment. And here's what some of the research shows, that a lot of people avoid difficult conversations because they feel like they're being hypocritical. For example, it's hard to address an uncomfortable issue if you yourself have done something similar in the past. And let me tell you what, I have been the person to say, these kids can't, right? I've been that teacher. I've been in those shoes. I've even been in those shoes and noticed myself saying that as an instructional leader. Another huge factor in keeping us from having difficult conversations is nervous feelings. It's just nerve-wracking to try to figure out how to address something, especially in the moment. Another is time. Like we feel like we don't have time to address the things that are happening in the moment that need to be addressed. But of course, if we're not spending time addressing those things, then we're spending a lot more time in the moment and down the road dealing with the same issues again and again. And then finally, the last one that I really want to point out here is that there could be a culture of silence, meaning we don't have an organization that has developed a culture of transparency and trust where these difficult conversations can take place. So how do we combat that? Well, first, let's talk about some of the phrases that you might hear. I have already mentioned, and the title shows, the one thing that we often hear is these kids can't. They can't do XYZ. They don't know how to XYZ. So that's one. Another that I hear a lot that comes up in team meetings is they don't care. And I'm talking about, when they say they, I'm talking about students. The students don't care, right? And I think that most of us would say we don't really believe that. We don't really believe that they don't care. In fact, Jim Knight talks a lot about, in his book, Better Conversations, he talks about how to approach those kinds of situations where people say something that maybe they don't really believe this, and saying, do you really believe XYZ? Do you really believe that your students don't care? Now, in some situations, a teacher might just be so fed up that they're like, no, they don't care. They don't give a turd about this, right? So those kinds of things can happen, and we know that that's going to happen. So how do we address it? We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Another that I often hear is we don't have time. There's no time. I'm sure you hear that often as well. Some other limiting beliefs that we hear in especially data meetings is things like the questions were too hard, or the parents aren't involved, or it was a Friday and my students don't do well on a Friday. So these are all of the phrases that you might hear, and I'm sure so many more that keep our teams stalled and keep them from being productive. So how do we get ahead of it before it happens, and how do we respond in the moment when it does happen? The very first thing that I'm going to be talking to you about is implementing phrases to avoid and mindsets to employ. So I just want you to picture you're in a team meeting, and this is going to be a proactive strategy. You're in a team meeting, and let's just assume that your teachers are analyzing data. And let's also kind of assume, since state testing is coming up, let's assume that they are analyzing state assessment data. When they are looking at the results, you know that inevitably this is going to be a time it's easy to get into some limiting belief statements, some phrases that we actually want teachers to avoid. One of those is something I've already mentioned, like those questions were just too hard, right? Another could be, well, it was a Friday when they took this assessment, and Fridays are always really hard for them to maintain stamina. So that could be another. Another could be, this class has just been low all year long. So we might hear those phrases again and again, or types of phrases like that. If you know that that's a possibility, that you're going to get into this meeting and you're going to hear teachers either vent or want to find justifications, which is absolutely normal, by the way, we all do it, then you might start your meeting with phrases to avoid and mindsets to employ. And you will say to them something to the effect of, I know during meetings like this, especially when we're analyzing data, it can be really challenging to look at the results, the assessment results, and decide how we're going to move students forward without thinking about things that we can't change. So I want you to think about some phrases we might want to avoid during this time so that this can be a productive meeting and we can leave this meeting feeling successful. And what we're going to do is think about some mindsets to employ instead. And you might give them the example from the get-go that the questions were too hard. So that might be a phrase to avoid. A mindset to employ instead would be, yes, the questions are hard. We're not denying that. And there are going to be difficult questions on any state assessment. That's the mindset we want to employ instead. Okay. I want to shift this a little bit to think kind of about limiting beliefs and liberating truths, because that's on a similar thread. So let's just look at it. I have a document here. If you're listening to this episode after the fact, no worries. You're going to be getting access to this document. All you have to do is go to catchingupwithkc.com/gift vault, and you will see this episode listed and be able to download this immediately. So here are some limiting belief examples. There's not enough time in the day to get everything done. That's a phrase we want to avoid. Instead, a mindset we want to employ or a liberating truth is, I can make use of the time I have in smart and strategic ways. Another is that phrase that we've talked about already is, my students can't. So how do we take that phrase and we avoid that, but instead implement a mindset that is more productive and helpful? And that could be, this is what I know my students can do. Another could be, they don't have this skill just yet, but here are the skills that they do have. And here's another that I've already mentioned too. They just aren't motivated, don't want to, don't care. Okay, that's a phrase that we often might lean into, specifically if we just feel like we have to get some things off of our chest and vent about it. But instead, what is the mindset we want to try to employ? They do care, and I can help them gain skills to successfully engage and participate. Okay, so that is the first strategy I want to share with you, is phrases to avoid, mindsets to employ. Remember, this is a proactive strategy. So if you know that your staff might heavily lean into phrases to avoid and those limiting beliefs, do this at the beginning of the meeting so that you can have a productive meeting moving forward. The second strategy I want to share, again, goes hand in hand. All of these can go hand in hand, is the pause method. And this comes directly from my book, The Craft of Clarity. If you haven't bought it, be sure to go to Amazon. You can purchase it directly from there and then leave me a review. But the pause method prepares you for actually what we're going to talk about next. Okay. And this is your more not reactive, but responsive strategy. The pause method is just a mindset strategy for you, and you literally are taking a pause. The acronym PAUSE stands for P, pause, to just ponder, pray, or meditate. Like, just breathe for a second and prepare your body for listening, because we want first and foremost to listen to what they have to say. You do not have to respond immediately. Take time to pause. Nod lightly or just sit back and think. Give them your thinking face so they know you're processing things. And then A stands for accept. Accept how you are feeling or how you're interpreting things. Your feelings are completely natural, as are theirs. So if you are having a physical or emotional response to what they're saying, and this could be frustrating, just accept that for a moment. Let it sit, recognize that it's okay that you're feeling that way, but we don't want to react with those initial emotions. And then the U stands for understand. Really try to understand from their perspective. We're going to talk more about perceptions in a little bit with the next strategy, but just try to understand from their potential perspectives. And then S stands for separate your personal feelings from the situation so you can become more objective. That's a tough one to do and definitely takes practice, but just separate your own personal feelings and look at the situation as an objective situation. And then E, finally, decide the most appropriate way to engage. So after you have paused and you've kind of taken a moment to process your thoughts and feelings, you've kind of tried to listen intently to see why your teachers or staff or team members might be saying the things that they're saying, and you know there's always a deeper level, something deeper that's going on, then you are ready for the third strategy. Okay, so far I've told you about phrases to avoid and mindsets to employ, and you are doing that with your team members. The second is the pause method. You are pausing, and that is your own strategy. You're doing that with yourself. And the third, you are actually also doing with yourself. This is a responsive strategy that I love, love, love to teach people to practice and implement because it allows you to say things that you feel you can't say, and that is the perception checking method. The perception checking method comes from the work of Susan Scott, who wrote Fierce Conversations. She writes all about how to say things when you feel they can't be said. And the idea here is that you are taking your private thoughts, you are neutralizing them so that you can make them public. You can make them known to the public. So your private thought is what you think and feel, but you don't say, right? So let's just assume that we're in this meeting with a group of, it could be teachers, it could be any kind of staff members that you're working with, but they are starting to say these kids just can't. And there's like a ripple effect, right? Like a domino effect of one teacher says it, another teacher says it, and they just all start to latch on. Some teachers who don't even believe that don't want to go against the grain. And so they just kind of sit back and either join in on the conversation or they don't say anything at all. And in your mind, what you're thinking is, yes, these kids can. You're just not holding them to high enough expectations, and you're not giving them the kind of instruction they need to be able to do this. Let's have better hopes for our students, right? You're thinking all of that. You're feeling frustrated, but you're not saying it out loud. Now, for some of us, you might say it out loud, but I'm telling you, I'm going to be one of the people that's probably not going to say that out loud. What I tend to do is go straight from private to public without neutralizing my thoughts. And I might be thinking and feeling these things, but what I say out loud absolutely contradicts what I'm thinking and feeling. So I might think and feel, yes, they can. Stop limiting your students. They can do this. We've got to hold our students to higher expectations and think that they can do this. I might be thinking that what I say out loud is, yeah, I know, right? Yeah, they can't. They can't. That's crazy. Oh my gosh, they're missing so many skills. And yes, they may be missing so many skills. But often what we are frustrated and complaining about or venting about are things that we cannot control, right? Or we're kind of taking, and I don't love saying this, but I'm going to say it. We're taking the path of least resistance for ourselves when we say these students can't. Because if I say these students can't, then it's not necessarily a reflection on me and my instruction. Make sense? Now, we want them to take ownership without feeling burdened. So that's a hard place to be, but if we can start to do some perception checking, maybe we can start to shift, see some 1-degree shifts in our team members. Okay, so what we want to do instead of saying what we don't really mean is we want to neutralize. right? So we're aware of what we think and feel, but we are aware of it without attachment. So I am aware that I think, yes, these students can. We are not providing the highest quality to your instruction to keep them engaged so that they want to do it, right? So I'm going to think to myself, is this something I need to say out loud? Is this something that's going to be beneficial to say? And is there a way I can say this without attachment? And here's how you're going to do that. You are going to say what you see and hear, and you're going to make it shared and known. And you're going to do that by implementing some perception checking stems. Perception checking stems are basically, I want to check my perception against what you are thinking, which means I'm taking what I'm thinking, I'm asking you permission to share what I'm thinking, and then you're going to check it for me. And that way, it's just kind of sitting here in the middle as something that has been said. It doesn't necessarily belong to anyone. We're kind of analyzing it, right? I've put it out in the middle of the table. Let's take a look at it and analyze it together. So I'm going to share with you some perception checking sentence stems that I have that you also can get access to. Don't forget, catchingupwithcasey.com/gift vault. You'll see this episode. It says instant access. When you click on that, you should be able to get these two. I think I have both of these linked there: perception checking sentence stems and the limiting beliefs and liberating truth. So I want to take what I'm thinking and feeling, I want to neutralize it and lay it out on the table. So here's how I'm going to do that. I might say, would you like to hear something I'm either feeling, thinking, or wondering right now? They have the option to say, no, thank you. They're probably not going to say that. What they're probably going to say is, yes, or sure, sounds good. And then I'm going to lay on the table, okay, here's something I'm thinking, or here's something I'm feeling. I'm putting it out there as just something that exists. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not attaching myself to it. I'm pulling it outside of me. Can you just picture that in your mind, like you're putting it out on the platter and just analyzing it, almost like putting a microscope to it? So I might say, would you like to hear something I'm thinking, feeling, wondering? They're going to say yes, hopefully. And I'm going to say, I'm kind of thinking that maybe our students can. They just don't have the skills yet to do this. What are your thoughts on that? Or do you agree with that? Or is that something that we could get on board with? Right. So you're asking permission to check their perception, check your perception, and then you're inviting them into a continued conversation about it. Here's another one that I really like. While you were speaking, I had a thought. I would like to check it out with you. So I'm not saying that this is fact and this is true. It's something that's on my mind. I want you to check it. Another, and I'm just going to share one more from this, and we're going to start to wrap up this episode. There are some thoughts, feelings, or curiosities I've had, and I'd like to check what might be accurate or inaccurate. So if I'm saying, I want to ask you something, tell me if you think it's accurate or not, that gives them the opportunity to respond and tell you, no, I don't think that's accurate. And that's okay. That is a difficult conversation made a little bit easier. Okay, so today, I have given you just a snippet of 3 different strategies that you might use. Again, they can go hand in hand when you are trying to get ahead of limiting beliefs and those phrases you want people to avoid so you have more productive meetings, better conversations. Those 3, to recap, are the phrases to avoid and mindsets to employ that you are doing with your team members. The second is the pause method. You are doing that on your own. And the third is something that you also on your own are initiating, and that is perception checking. I would love, love, love to know what was most useful for you from this episode. If you want to leave a comment or shoot me an email, trust me, I read those. I get great joy from hearing from people who listen to the episode. And then also be sure to leave a review so that other people can find the show and learn how to lead teams confidently and with clarity. Okay, guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, let me know, and I will catch you next time. Hey there, thanks for joining this episode. I would love for you to do me 3 solid favors before you head out. Number 1, subscribe to this show. I've got a lot of great guests and content coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Number 2, share this show. Share it with your like-minded colleagues and friends who want to learn how to lead clarity-driven teams. And finally, connect with me on all the social media platforms. You can find me at Catch Up with Casey on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Until next time, go off and create teams that leave people feeling inspired, empowered, and eager for more each day.